Spirit of life and love, we gather together in different ways this morning, from computer screens, from telephones, from car radios. We gather, reaching out across the wires, waiting from a safe distance to come together in religious community. From living room to front porch to car seat, we gather as we are able, ready to be of service to each other, to the world, ready to build the community of hope and love. As we face this bright morning, we are apart, but we are together, offering our love, our commitment, our hope, and our prayers in service to one another and this world. It is a new way, but an old way, that we come together and worship today. For Passover, which reminds us of the courage and strength of those seeking freedom in the past, we light the flame. For Easter, which reminds us that love is our greatest challenge, we light the flame. For our gathering today in this sacred space, we light the flame. For the opportunity to be together as a community, to remember the past, to plan for our future, to be alive in our present. Join me in saying our spoken affirmation. The words are in your morning program. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. The Universalist minister, the Reverend Dr. Elizabeth M. Strong, offers us this morning's opening thought, slightly adapted to add flower communion from a meditation she wrote called The Promise of Easter. Out of the earth rises light, rises life, rises spring. May we join with the miracles that is springtime and enter into life with lightness and joy. Out of the Spirit rises faith, rises hope, rises love. Let us resurrect with spring. Let us resurrect with the Spirit and enter into renewed life as we gather in our time of worship together this Easter morning. Let us also name another sacred tradition that occurs each spring, Passover, retelling the story of the liberation of the Israelites from slavery in ancient Egypt. This story is in the book of Exodus. May we join with the miracle that is Easter and the freedom from slavery that is Passover and enter into life with hope and love.
A reading today comes from the piece called We're Not Sure What Happened by the Reverend Daniel E. Budd. He writes, "We received an invitation from our neighborhood newspaper to place an ad for Easter. Someone suggested to me that we should advertise It would say something like, join us. We're not sure what happened. I was tempted. We're not sure what happened. But we know what it's like when someone appears whose message we feel offers hope, who inspires us with new ways of living which touch our hearts and lift our spirits in anticipation. We know what it's like when they fall short of our expectations, or worse, are cut down by the forces of hate and bigotry which too often enter human life. We're not sure what happened, but we know what it's like when someone has grown profoundly into our lives, who seems as much a part of our living as our breathing, whose presence lives in our souls. We know what it's like when death takes them from us, perhaps prematurely, and the empty place in our souls is now like an empty tomb. We're not sure what happened, but we know what it's like to feel sorrow and loss, despair and grief. We know the waves of tears and the thoughts of the past which flow through us, which begin to fill the emptiness with stories and memories, begin to shore us up again with a different presence which will live with us for all of our lives. We're not sure what happened, but we know what it's like to realize, to have it dawn upon us, that what we have known and loved lives on now with and within us, a part of who we are. We know that somehow in our hearts and spirits, resurrection is real, not that of the body, but of the spirit, a spirit renewed, even reborn, in the midst of our lives and our living. We're not sure what happened, but we know that there is a difficult hope, a faith that through the living of whatever sorrow and grief we feel and will continue to feel on occasion, there is also a growing sense of grace and gratitude, of joy and thankfulness, and the mysterious and abiding astonishment of human being. In that wonder, we may find our strength, our own sense of Easter.
Gloria, Kyrie eleison, Baruch atah Adonai, Alleluia. Shalom, Nando Horeneka. Amen. Hallelujah. Amen.
For our practice this morning, I invite you to take a couple of deep breaths. Close your eyes if you wish and listen as I read a meditation by Reverend Anne E. Treadwell. Now, in shared quietness, we shall listen to the wisdom of our inner hearts and minds as we join in meditation. Let us be mindful of this special time, as again the feast of unleavened bread draws nigh, which is called the Passover. Let us remember the history of this feast, the celebration of beginning, a long and hard journey into freedom and the promised land. We give thanks for our own journeys, our long and hard learnings, our freedom, and our glimpses of the promised land. Let us be mindful of how closely hatred and fear are intertwined, as they were for the priests and scribes as they reacted to Jesus. May we never, through the fears, seek to kill that which is good and true. Let us seek forgiveness for times when our fears have outweighed our love. Let us remember how easily evil may enter our hearts. As it entered the heart of Judas, we pray that we may have the wisdom to recognize evil and the strength to keep it away. Let us be mindful of the greed which also often rules us, as it ruled Judas, who covenanted with the murderers for money. May we never betray anything good or anyone loved for the promise of selfish gain. Let us remember the night of the feast, the night of betrayal, the night of love, the night of hate. Let us remember in silence and wonder. Let us sit quietly for a time.
So while I was drinking my coffee this morning, I happened to glance at CNN.com, as I typically do, and I saw an op-ed piece called, "I'm a Millennial Nun, but I still want Easter." N-O-N-E, none. Was written by Jill Filipovich, who's a journalist based in Kenya. She writes about going to church as a child and growing into adulthood as a nun, one of the 25% of Americans who claim no religious or spiritual affiliation, and how she created her own tradition with friends of wine-soaked brunches and walks in the park on Easter Sunday. That was her routine. And she wondered, as she prepared to move to Kenya, would she find people with whom she could create new traditions? But what caught my eye was her description of, quote, observing traditionally religious holidays in sometimes untraditional ways, using them as both anchors and trampolines, ways to keep us moored in our cultures and family histories, as well as jumping points to discard what does not serve us or feels ill-fitting to our values and beliefs. Well, we UUs know a little something about that, I think. Our faith tradition draws upon a number of different faith traditions and sources. We draw upon humanist, spiritual, and religious teachings. And in our worship here at USG, we honor many of those traditions with celebrations such as Diwali and the Jewish High Holy Days. And next week, we'll be outside in the Grove. But Easter can be a tricky day for UUs. Unitarian Universalism traces its roots back to Christianity. That's where it came from. Indeed, the term Unitarian refers to the belief in one God as opposed to the Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. As such, Unitarians did not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus, which forms the basis of the Easter holiday. So what do we do with Easter, this most holy day of the Christian faith? Former UUA President Bill Schultz, and one of my professors this year, once compared Easter to attending a party at which the guest of honor is someone you don't know. Sounds like Bill. So how do we celebrate this day in a way that is intentional and sincere? Because yes, indeed, Easter is a tricky day for us. UU congregations across the country this morning are celebrating Easter in a variety of ways. Some are marking it with flowered communion. Some are just celebrating the coming of spring. We are doing both, in a way. But for some congregations, they just can't get past this resurrection thing. They can't believe it. It's not physically possible. It's a myth. Years ago, Reverend Homer Jack challenged us to understand the reality and usefulness of the myth behind the holiday and not desecrate it, either with commercialism or debunking. I like that. I like the use of the word debunking. We've been talking a lot here in the last few months about tolerance and acceptance of those who have different beliefs than ours. Is it possible that even if you don't believe in the resurrection, that there is a way to honor and accept the beliefs of those who do? Is it possible that we can find a way to understand the reality and usefulness of the myth behind the holiday? I say yes. So I suggest that this Easter, let's look at the life of Jesus the man, the teacher, the prophet, the healer. Jesus was the ultimate social justice activist. Whether or not he was resurrected, he died for what he believed in. He died for a better world. And to me, that is truly the embodiment of standing on the side of love. What about us? Reverend Forrest Church once asked, are we living in such a way that our lives will prove worth dying for? How would you answer that question? The Solemn Reproaches of the Cross is an ancient Christian document based on the 2nd century writings of an Italian bishop and patterned after Psalm 78. It reads in part, I came to you as the least of your brothers and sisters. I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger and you did not welcome me. Naked and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison and you did not visit me. For this you nailed me to a cross. Reverend Fred Hammond likens that nailing to the cross to refusing to act, to refusing to help those in need. Some might see a sense of despair in those words, the suggestion that there's nothing we can do in this life. But I don't buy that. I think, in fact, the opposite is true, that these words are a directive to us. They are a reminder to us that there is still hope, that there is still something we can do. Too many in our society today are struggling with homelessness, poverty, and despair. They're victims of oppression, abuse, discrimination, and racism. We ourselves are bombarded daily with misogynistic, hate-filled speech. Instead of living in love, some of us barely speak to our neighbors, let alone help them. But we can do more. We can follow the teachings of Jesus and live according to his example. Even if you don't believe in his physical resurrection, there is much to be learned from his life and death. Let's not view the resurrection literally. Rather, let's think of it as a metaphorical resurrection and challenge ourselves this Easter day to do better by one another. So on this Easter day, I'll ask you to consider a few questions. How does the life of Jesus, teacher, prophet, and activist, affect you and how you live today? How has the Spirit of Jesus been resurrected in you? Are you motivated to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to heal the sick? Are you motivated to stop the violence in our world, to end racism, to stop oppression and discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity? Are you motivated to save the planet? And I'm going to take it a step further. Are you just motivated, or are you actually doing something about it? Are you standing on the side of love, believing in its power to heal our world? Are you living in such a way that your life will prove worth dying for? I'm going to leave you today with an excerpt from Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein's Being the Resurrection. She writes, "He's not coming back, you know. He's not coming back unless it is we who rise for him. We who lay healing hands on the reviled and rejected like he did on his behalf. We who rage for righteousness in his insistent voice. We who love the sinner, even knowing that the sinner is no farther off than our own heartbeat. What if by some miracle, and why not a miracle, he did come back? Wouldn't it be a miracle to live just for one day as if we followed in his path? So that if he did come back, he would take a look around and say, this is what I meant. And we could say in response, it took us a long time, but we finally figured it out. Let us live to make it so. Amen. Let us in.
Easter seems like the perfect morning to hold our annual flower communion. This uniquely designed Unitarian ritual celebrates its 97th year. Its history is an important part of why it has become so meaningful to Unitarian Universalists the world over. We turn to Reginald Zatoli's history to remind ourselves of this celebration for religious liberals. He explained it like this. The Flower Communion service was created by Norbert Čapek, who lived from 1870 to 1942, and who founded the Unitarian Church in Czechoslovakia. He introduced this special service to that church on June 4th, 1923. For some time, he had felt the need for some symbolic ritual that would bind people more closely together. The format had to be one that would not alienate any who had forsaken other religious traditions. The traditional Christian communion service with bread and wine was unacceptable to the members of his congregation because of their strong reaction against the Catholic faith. So he turned to the native beauty of the countryside for elements of a communion which would be genuine to them. This simple service was the result. It was such a success that it was held yearly just before the summer recess of the church. The Flower Communion was brought to the United States in 1940 and introduced to the members of our Cambridge, Massachusetts church by Dr. Čapek's wife, Maya V. Čapek. The Czech-born Maya had met Norbert Čapek in New York City while he was studying for his PhD, and it was at her urging that Norbert left the Baptist ministry and turned to Unitarianism. The Čapeks returned to Czechoslovakia in 1921 and established the dynamic liberal church in Prague. Maya Čapek was ordained in 1926. It was during her tour of the United States that Maya introduced the Flower Communion, which had been developed in the Prague church, at the Unitarian Church in Cambridge. Unfortunately, Maya was unable to return to Prague due to the outbreak of World War II, and it was not until after the war was over that Norbert Čapek's death in a Nazi concentration camp was revealed. From this beginning, the service has spread to many of our Unitarian Universalist congregations and has been adapted along the way. People were asked to bring a flower of their choice, either from their own gardens or from the field or roadside. When they arrived at church, a large vase stood waiting in the vestibule, attended by 2 young members of the church school. Each person was asked to place their own flower in the vase. This signified that it was by their own free will they joined with the others. The vase that contained all the flowers was a symbol of the United Church Fellowship. The young attendants helped with the arrangement of the bouquet. Later, they carried the vase up to the front of the auditorium and placed it on a table there. Dr. Čapek had then said a prayer, after which he walked over and consecrated the flowers while the congregation stood. The 2 attendants then took the vase back out into the vestibule. After the service, as people left the church, they went to the vase and each took a flower from the vase other than the one that they had brought. The significance of the Flower Communion is that as no 2 flowers are alike, so no 2 people are alike, yet each has a contribution to make. Together, the different flowers form a beautiful bouquet. Our common bouquet would not be the same without the unique addition of each individual flower, and thus it is with our church community. It would not be the same without each and every one of us. Thus, this service is a statement of our community. This year, our Flower Communion is going to be done by proxy. If all goes well, everyone who is participating via Zoom with video will, in a few moments, be able to hold up your flower for us all to see. Everyone, whether on video or audio, if you would like to offer a greeting or share a joy, concern, hope, or fear, And if you're holding your flower with no video, you can tell us about your flower. In order to know who wishes to speak, you need to tap or click on your screen to raise your Zoom hand. A quick review how to do it. If you're using your cell phone, tap your screen. At the screen bottom, tap Participants, then tap your own name, then tap Raise Hand. Now, if you're joining us through a desktop or a laptop, tap the participant icon at the screen bottom. The participant list appears at screen right. If it's already visible, you see yourself there in the list. And then tap the raise hand icon at the bottom of the participant list. You can do this now. Remember, you can also type a chat message if you can't raise your hand. I will call on you one by one. And now, to our first ever and prayerfully our last ever virtual flower communion. Please hold up your flowers for others to see.
Dan,
Yes.
I think if I make you host, we're going to lose video. You may have to do it from my computer here.
Okay. All right. I'm maybe moving to a different location in just a moment. As I call on you, Ellie will bring a flower and place it in our collective vase here in front of the pulpit. So we are going to try it. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Hope you're all well. This flower came from my front yard, from a rose bush in the front yard. I love everyone else's flowers. Thank you.
Hello? Hello?
Talk, Dan.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Good.
Okay. Marion, talk.
All right, Marion.
Oh, yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Say yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't have a flower in my hand, but I'm looking out my office window and there is a lilac bush below. So that's
All
my
right.
flower
And we're
for
putting
today.
a flower now for Marion.
The next is Cindy.
The next person is Cindy.
Good morning, you all. I'm so glad to be joining you today. I
And we have just put in a flower for Cindy.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Next person. Yes. Amy.
The next person is Amy.
Good morning. I have a sprig of climbing roses from my bush outside my kitchen window. They always bloom just in time for the rain to beat them down.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Next person is Donald.
The next person is Donald.
Hello, can you hear me? Early.
The rains last night brought in a white iris in my backyard. There's several of them blooming around the tree back there. I bought this house last fall, and this spring has been a revelation watching those different flowers pop up that I have no idea what they're going to be. I'm doing well. That's it. I'm staying close to the house. I'm not seeing anybody for the last couple of weeks. Looks like there's another couple of weeks going. Just happy to be alive.
Mhm.
Okay, next person is Megan.
The next person is Megan. Thank you, Don.
Hi guys. I don't have the bandwidth for video and I don't have any flowers because I don't leave the house. But I'm so glad to be here with all of you guys and to see your flowers and to see your faces.
That's it.
That's it. Have we missed anyone? Have we missed anyone? All right. Thank you very much. And we're going to put in a final flower. Thank you for contributing and thank you for your patience with this a little bit awkward situation, but with good humor and good grace, I think it went pretty well. Thank you so much. And now, some special music.
When Reverend Chapek designed the flower communion service, he included these words of consecration. Infinite Spirit of life, we ask thy blessing on these thy messengers of fellowship and love. May they remind us, amid diversities of knowledge and of gifts, to be one in desire and affection and devotion to thy holy will. May they also remind us of the value of comradeship, of doing and sharing alike. May we cherish friendships as one of the most precious gifts. May we not let awareness of another's talents discourage us or sully our relationship, but may we realize that whatever we can do, great or small, the efforts of all of us are needed to do thy work in this world. Thank you, Ellie. That was fantastic. Reverend Chapek concluded the communion of flowers with the same prayer each year. In the name of Providence, which implants in the seed the future of the tree, and in the hearts of men and women, the longing for people living in human love, in the name of the highest, in whom we move and who makes the mother and father, the brother and sister what they are, in the name of sages and great religious leaders who sacrificed their lives to hasten the coming of peace and justice. Let us renew our resolution sincerely to be real brothers and sisters, regardless of any kind of bar which estranges one from another. In this holy resolution, may we be strengthened, knowing what we are, God's family, that one Spirit, the Spirit of love, unites us. And may we endeavor for a more perfect and joyful life. Amen. Our closing song this morning is Cat Stevens singing "Morning Has Broken."
Our parting thought comes from the writing of the Reverend Nathan C. Walker from a selection he calls What Happens When We Stop Living. The question is not what happens when we die. Nobody really knows. The real question is what happens when we stop living. The stoicism we face on a daily basis is a symptom of a larger illness called a dually dulled life. Our lives can be hypnotized by the monotonous commutes, multiplied by a flickering fluorescent light that falls upon a micromanaging boss who thinks everything you do in your cubicle is an extension of his or her power. Who here is dying a slow and numbing death? There's no time to be lulled by monotony. There's no time to be blaming other people for our own feelings. If you don't like it, change it. There's no time for crying or complaining or gossiping or clinging to that fashionable grudge bag. No, it's time to wake up, to rise up, and to carry ourselves into a day worth living. Let us live one day, this day, with passion and a sense of collective synergy. Let us live one day, this day, by asking questions that truly challenge us and make us feel alive. For today's question is not what happens when we die, it's what happens when we stop living. Join me as together we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet
together again.